Well, hey everyone, Steve Campbell here with Kevin McCarter. In our last video, Dan and I had the pleasure of connecting with each one of you to discuss the power of doing so simple, which is actually just making a plan. We had talked about maybe some of the foundational things you can start to look at, as well as how to have meaningful and intentional conversations with the people you care about your money and in your life. In this episode, though, we want to go a little bit deeper. So, Kevin, once we've kind of talked about the basics of planning, kind of where's the next step that we want viewers to go with?
Yeah, so next steps here for somebody that's still working and accumulating assets over the course of their life, there's three main things you can do that really pour gasoline on somebody's projections and pour gasoline on somebody's scenario and really light up the projections. The first one you can do is make sure you have a budget and make sure you stay on track with your budget. And we'll discuss this a little bit further in a minute. The next one, as part of your budget, is you need to have a plan for your debt. And now, plan for your debt does not mean paying off your debt necessarily. It means you need to have a plan for it. And then once you have those two things wrapped up, for somebody that's still working, still accumulating, you've freed up the cash flow, then you need to understand how your investments impact your projections. And those are three biggest things here that you can be doing.
So then let's maybe talk about the first one that you had mentioned, budget. We are going to exhaust this word quite a bit through these videos because it's important. So talk to us about a budget.
Yeah, and exactly what you said, Steve. This is the third time now we've brought up budgeting as part of an important thing to do, because if you don't have your budget squared away right, everything starts falling apart
Yep.
behind the scenes here. And now, whenever we talk about a budget is not some legalistic humdrum sit down every Friday and list out all your spending and such like that. It does not have to be that way. A budget, you should try to make your budget be something that you're excited to follow, that you know your parameters, you know your boundaries. Because whenever you have these budgets set up right, this is how, like you opened up here and said, like how it aligns your intentions with your actions. That's exactly what this does. The budget sets those parameters. And so the budget could be you actually have a written out spreadsheet. It could be that you only deposit so much money in a certain account, and that's your spending. You need to have some sort of method to make sure money is going where you want it to go.
Yep. And we want to know where our money's going. And as Dan and I talked about, some of the big issues between couples, significant others deals with money, and budget is not one of those fun things that most couples love doing. So you got to find ways to, like you said, not make it legalistic, but as much as we need to understand what's happening with our money. One of the big reasons that people have to have a budget is because we've just accumulated debt over the years. And
Yeah.
so how about we talk about when it comes to debt, maybe what are some strategies we want to think about?
Yeah. So debt is usually a major part of somebody's financial picture, because usually they got a mortgage, they might have some car loans, they might hopefully not have any credit card debt, things like that. And when we start talking about debt, all debt does not need to be paid down immediately the moment it happens. Like if you have the resources to do that, heck yeah, do it. Get the debt out of your life. But more importantly, you just need to have a plan for your
Yep.
debt. And now with your debt, there's three things you can do with your debt. First one's very simple. You can pay off your debt, get it out. Second one is you can maybe try to restructure the debt, maybe consolidate the debt into something that's a more manageable payment or lower interest rates, things like that, refinancing the debt. So some sort of restructuring of the debt. And the third thing you can do with your debt, and this one's pretty easy, just let it ride here. And what I mean by let it ride, that does not mean don't make payments on it. What I mean by let the debt ride is, like, if you have a mortgage, a lot of people during COVID were able to refinance their mortgages down to like sub 3% rates or right around 3% rates and stuff like that. That's a low interest rate. Let that mortgage payment ride. We don't have to be at a gazelle intensity to pay that thing off, if you want to put it in Dave Ramsey terms here. And so whenever we talk about debt, three things you can do with this. And now different types of debt are going to fall into different categories there. One that I think is pretty reasonable here is, like, if you have some high interest rate debt, get that debt out of your life, because that is a wealth killer. That thing is poison to your financial future. And a lot of these high interest rate debts, credit card debts, sometimes if you have like some sort of consumer purchase, some of those consumer purchases can have really high interest rates. Like if you finance furniture, you finance sometimes car loans, can have really high interest rate debts. All this to say, high interest rate debt, that is a poison. You have to get that out of your life. That kind of debt falls in the first category of pay that thing off as soon as possible. We need to get that thing out. Even if that means stopping investing for a period of time to pay off a 30% interest rate credit card, it's worthwhile to do that. You can sort of feel like you're taking one step back in your financial journey to stop investing to pay off credit card debt. But whenever you get this thing paid off, then you can take 2, 3 steps forward in this. And so it's a very interesting thing. You do this a lot with people making their projections out. You actually see how it impacts things and see the growth this creates. And so first things first, high interest rate debt, get it out of our life.
Yep.
And now you can pay that off, or another thing you can do is maybe you consolidate it into some other type of loan, and such. And we can talk and do things like that to see if that's feasible. Now, the next type of debt, this is more the lower interest rate debt. And we discussed this briefly, like a mortgage. A lot of mortgages right now are pretty low interest rate debts. If you're going out and getting a new mortgage, then it's sitting around that probably about 7% interest rate or so for like a new residential home and such.
Yep.
If it's a low interest rate, like sub 4% or so, 5%, it might just be worthwhile just to let that ride and just pay your payments on it. Especially if you have the cash flow means to still do everything else you want to do, let it ride. But the overarching point here is you need to have a plan for the debt. You need to be eyes wide open about your debt to say this is exactly where the poison is, where we have some really low interest rate debt, or we have some high interest rate debt, and have a game plan saying this is the things we're going to attack. These are the things we're going to let ride. These are some things we might need to look at restructuring along the way.
And Kevin, you might have some viewers saying, well, I don't know the interest rate on my debt. And if that's you, there's zero shame in it. Because Dan and I had talked about one of the simple things you can do as you begin to make a plan is just gathering statements for, things like investments, things like loans. I think many times people are surprised that because of automation today and paying with checking accounts and automatic payments, we're not always fully aware of the amount of each payment or the interest that is associated with it. So when Kevin says high interest is poison, you may not realize those, north of 12, 15, 17% credit cards. I mean, those are killers. So just going through that simple motion of gathering statements, looking at the debt that you have, getting into an Excel tracker, whatever loans you have, the interest rates, are they variable? Are they fixed? What's the payment? Just those simple things of organizing can really help you start to make a game plan for what's next. Because I think for a lot of viewers, the challenge today is what to do with extra money if they have it. Do you pay down debt? Not if it's lower interest rate debt, or should you invest, or should you just put it into saving? So once we've tackled the idea of debt and some debt strategies, let's talk about investing and maybe where should be a good place for individuals to start.
Exactly. And so you framed that up perfectly, Steve. I'm going to reiterate it because you repeat what's important here. Once you have the budget situated, once you have the debt situated, once you have your overall cash flow situated where you want to, your eyes wide open about it, then you move on to investing. And once we move on to investing, there's a couple different types of accounts we can look at. When I start talking about types of accounts, I'm talking more about the taxability of the accounts, because how you invest and how it's going to impact your taxes go hand in hand. You cannot separate those. And so we'll talk about the three major types of tax, we'll call them implications about the different types of accounts you can have. Your first type of a tax type of an account is your pre-tax accounts. Pre-tax accounts are very simple. Basically, you put money into this account, you get a tax deduction for whenever you put the money in. The money grows tax deferred. When you go to pull that money out in retirement, you pay taxes on the larger amount later on. And this is very common, like 401ks, 403bs, 457 plans, traditional IRAs, such like that. That's where you see that pre-tax treatment happening. Now, on the other end of the spectrum there's called Roth. And then these Roth dollars in the type of accounts, these Roth dollars do just the opposite. Basically, you do not get a tax deduction for putting money in there. It's after-tax contributions or post-tax contributions, however you want to phrase it. There, go into this investment account. The money grows tax-free, and whenever you go to pull that money out in retirement, tax-free income. Or also, when your kid's going to inherit that money, tax-free income, which is nice. And so those are the two that most people are very familiar with. And there's this third one that I'd say like a good chunk of people are familiar with, but we'll still talk about it here and shed some more light on it. And these are your ideas of taxable investment accounts or brokerage accounts, depending on who you're talking to. They might name it differently, or joint investment accounts, or joint tenants, lots of survivorship accounts, things like that. These accounts will operate on a different set of tax rules. And when I mean a different set of tax rules, they follow what's called capital gains rules. And so how pre-tax and Roth accounts Basically, you either get a tax deduction or you don't. The money grows tax deferred or tax free. And then in retirement, you either pay taxes or you don't. It's Roth is like gap period in taxes. A taxable account does not have that gap period. What I mean by that is if you invest $100 into XYZ stock and the stock goes up to 150 and you sell that stock, you realize the gains of that stock, you have to pay taxes on that $50 of gains in there. And this would happen as the account is growing and across the years and as you're making moves in it. Any sort of income that account produces, you pay taxes on it, whether that be the dividends or interest or such like that. And so the overarching point here is like you have three different vehicles that directly impact how your projections play out and how your lifetime taxes play out. You got your pre-tax accounts, your Roth accounts, your taxable accounts. And you need to be very intentional about where you're contributing money and how it affects your taxes. If you're in a lower tax bracket right now, maybe contributing Roth is better. Whereas if you're in a higher tax bracket right now and you think you're going to be in a lower one later, maybe getting that tax deduction right now is more beneficial. Or if you want, we didn't talk about this with the taxable accounts, but one neat part about the taxable account is you have access to your money anytime you want it.
Yep.
Whereas in the pre-tax or the Roths, there's penalties if you get access to it early and such like that. So maybe as part of your planning and such, maybe you have a home you want to buy in the next 10 years, or you're wanting to do this big trip in the next 5 years. You want to do something and you're going to need access to the money, but you still want to save up for it and invest for it. The taxable account might be the best vehicle to make that happen with. And so all this to say, you need to be very intentional about what vehicle you're choosing. And your projections give you that answer. You have to build the projections to say which vehicle is the best one for you. And running projections for people and giving them advice on this, I mean, I've seen upwards of a couple $1 million of gains just by the same $7,000 put into an IRA pre-tax. You convert that to the same $7,000 going into a Roth, could add millions of dollars to the projections.
Yep.
And turn somebody whose projections aren't looking good into one that's looking great. All just because we're manipulating the taxes. We're saying when are we want to pay taxes, not letting the government dictate to us when we're paying taxes.
Yeah. Well, Kevin, I think that this has been a helpful first start to your video series. And just to help recap, Dan and I talked about making a plan and how simple it is. But in this video, we went a little bit deeper, that for us to accumulate or to gather the money that we need to live a life of financial freedom, we first really have to get a handle on how our money's being spent, where it's going, and understand our cash flow. When you do have debts, in this video, we talked about the two different types of debt, high interest and low interest. As Kevin said, we hope it sticks with you. High interest is poison. Got to get rid of it. Great way to do it. Get it all in an Excel spreadsheet. Understand the type of debt, the interest rate, and what it is. If it's a low interest rate, you might consider lettering it ride just because it's not costing you that much as interest over time. Once you begin to figure out, then we pivoted in this video to talk to you about the three different type of investment vehicles. And it's not a one size fits all. What is right for one viewer might be different for another. Somebody might find that a Roth 401k or Roth IRA is better for them today than somebody with a traditional. Just understand that in your retirement-based accounts, whether it's a Roth or traditional, they both go tax deferred. So just imagine that umbrella withholding taxes from raining down upon you in your working career. How you put money in is really the big difference, and how you take money out is the big difference. And if you need to create cash flow that you have extra left over and you want to have the ability to use that money whenever you need it, a taxable account may be a good way. It's not a one size fits all, but again, we wanted to give you some things to think about to get you on the right track to financial freedom. So we appreciate you watching this video. If we could be a help, we'll have links below so you can get in contact. And don't forget, we are here to help for every step of the way.